Hey there, School of Tomorrow students. You have joined the fall term of Heuristics for Teachers. Or not. You might just be lurking, or you're just following my videos anyway. Like, my YouTube channel goes back over a couple years now, and you've always been watching them, and now there's this fall term thing happening, but it's not especially what you've signed up for. So there's a lot of tracks through this train station, a lot of airplanes coming and going. There's things I don't or haven't talked about chronologically to date, like from the beginning of when I started making these videos till now. I haven't really talked a whole lot about, hey, how do I use Twitter effectively as a teacher? Because I style myself a lot as kind of a teacher trainer. And this is, I would say, where my humility comes in, and that I really don't have a lot to teach about Twitter at this point. It's like I'm on Twitter, I use Twitter, but as you know, I've been focusing on, say, Jupyter Notebooks and GitHub and just Git more generally, and or certain other media. In other words, blogging here. I specialize, and I don't apologize for doing that. I just think every teacher you find, and even every teacher you are, is going to have your biases, and you're going to know where your weak spots are, and that's where you really need to do more learning. So before I go out there and tell the world how to use Twitter, I would listen to my friend Deke Bridges. He's got a very active channel, and I used to see him around the neighborhood. Now I just can see him on Twitter sometimes. At this point in this chapter. Now let's catch up on New England Transcendentalism a little bit. On Facebook, I've actually framed it as homework. If you're doing fall term heuristics for teachers, consider viewing the below with special attention to the word secondhand and its context. So continues from there. I also have this blogged. So homework, fall term. I hit the eyeball here, and in I go to my blog. And I also have a little crack at English PhDs who don't ever touch Synergetics because they've decided it's outside their field of American literature. And I think we've established it's not outside their field. This American Transcendentalism includes No More Secondhand God, and that smoothly transitions us to Synergetics because the omnidirectional halo concept. It starts in one and reappears in the other. The continuity here between No More Secondhand God and Synergetics, you can't ignore it, right? Later appears in Synergetics. So this is an important little paragraph here. And my conclusion is, American literature, you should know something about, 4D and all that stuff, right? Because it's important now to our story and our crossroads in history and all kinds of stuff, right? American history, American literature. And even if you're an outsider, like you're reading from Iran or Russia or someplace, American history pays to learn it, right? And this TikTok wars, it puts it kind of again in perspective. I see it as largely generational, and you've got a blog post to memorialize, where we are in the timeline and give it the stamp of somebody's viewpoint, right? So Emerson, No More Secondhand God, and what I get into in that paper in Vilnius in the last video is the kind of analogy between what we could call being and mind in one lingo or nomenclature, and mind versus brain in the Bucky syllabus. In other words, the key word here also in Emerson, intuition, is another signature of the Transcendentalist movement. And in Bucky's writing, it has very clear meaning. It's somewhat what connects mind to brain, and neither term has an especially religious spin. And Bucky and Unitarianism and how to connect those, like he was a Unitarian, right? And wasn't he also, okay, here's my other question from last time. This is a transition. It's going to seem maybe a little abrupt, but actually very connected, because we're talking about Unitarianism, and we're also talking about critical path and Nietzsche, because I mentioned in the last video with Walter Kaufman, my teacher, and later, after I'm out of Princeton, I'm diving into Bucky more, thanks to having delved into the Werner Erhard cult, right? And I use the word cult very lightly as subculture. And interesting, all these cults. Like, I wouldn't want to give up diversity, would I? So, in Critical Path, we have a lot of interesting writing that I've been discussing in early videos, and I'm not going to read the book to you here, but I just wanted to read the opening sentence. Remember, Kiyoshi Kuramiya, that's been an important name as we've gone over some of the main civil rights activists of the 20th century. Stokely Carmichael, Kiyoshi Kuramiya was on that list for us. For gay rights as well. Okay, here's the opening sentence. It is the author's working assumption that the words good and bad, and those are italicized, good and bad, are meaningless. I'm just going to stop right there. Interesting, right? Okay, so it's not about sort of moralizing and picking out the bad guy and stomping on the bad guy. So that links to Nietzsche in the beyond good and evil sense. In other words, instead of moralizing, let's analyze moralizing and maybe develop new morals. Like, we're always going to have values, revaluing the values. But we're going to develop our sense of our code of conduct, our sense of ethics in the process of analyzing somewhat, dispassionately, you could say, various value systems. Let's dig in. Let's do archaeology. Let's do anthropology is what we're really doing. And let's do science fiction. Let's explore codes of conduct, ethics different cultures have without their having to exist. We don't need to wait for that. In other words, in science fiction, we can simulate, emulate, think through all kinds of civilizational models. And we can do that in a sort of structured and intentional way where we really want to explore the consequences of various technologies and so forth. So remember, we take science fiction very seriously. We're kind of Octavia Butler school of thought here on that. Okay, so what have we established? We have established that Synergetics is part of American literature and history. And we have established that there are also links to Nietzsche from Critical Path. The use of the word twilight and what it is the twilight of the world's power structures, the twilight of the gods, the idols, whatever. The use of twilight, also in connection with omnidirectional halo, is interesting topic, place for research. Finally, if you haven't watched the concept of dimension in Synergetics, I've just posted it to a news service called lbry.tv. Sounds like library, but it's LBRY. There's probably a way to pronounce that. I just joined, and I've just uploaded School of Tomorrow slide deck, this one, and here's what it looks like. Now, this is not the YouTube logo up here, but we have something that looks a lot like the dashboard we're used to. When you sit down in a car or truck, why not take advantage of, the usual configuration? Why start over? So it's kind of a tribute to this whole generic design. This looks pretty good. I haven't done anything much with this yet. Notice there's a little bit of Bitcoin going along, or actually some other cryptocurrency perhaps. All right, we'll talk to you in the near future, and continue on with your day.